What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Science Dispatch Podcast. My name is Cameron English, joined as always by Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, so good to see you. What's going on?
It's spring is almost sprung here in the Northeast. I'm very happy about that. I'm even happier that I survived going to Santa Fe. I didn't realize it was 7,000 feet in the air, and so that took a little while to adjust my boomer lungs to, but I'm okay. I survived.
See, it's called the Southwest, so you wouldn't think that would happen.
Well, I wouldn't think it would happen because a lot of the Southwest is very flat and it doesn't go up very high in terms of the buildings. It's not like New York where you got 50-story buildings. 8 stories is a big day in Flagstaff. But as it turns out, that even though it's only 2-story in Santa Fe, they're starting at 7,000 feet.
Yeah. So you're walking around like a 40-year smoker.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you're back at sea level or however high you are. I don't know. You seem like
I am at sea level. You'll be happy to know. I'm happy.
Very good. All right. Well, we've got a story that you wrote. Intriguing angle here, I got to say. It's not something I would have thought of. It's called What If Sugar Were Regulated Like Opioids or Air Pollution? From March 26th of this year. Really clever stuff. Here's your summary, and then let's get into the details. You say, if sugar were considered addictive, everyday consumption would be a different issue. In that world, long-standing assumptions about responsibility, risk, and regulation would start to unravel and result in a fundamentally different conversation about health and governance. All right, Chuck, I got to say, as I was reading this, I rolled my eyes multiple times, not because of anything you said, but because I have heard these ideas floated in respectable circles, and it just drives me up the wall. Take it away.
Okay, so here's the thing. One of our board members is a graduate of Harvard, and he sent me a Harvard article about is sugar addictive, and wanted us to maybe have an opinion about that. And that's what the origin of the whole article was I just took the position, okay, it's addictive. Now, how would we manage it from there? And then once I started looking at that, then I began to realize that each of our federal regulatory bodies will view sugar through its own lens. And as a result, it will treat it with the various tools that it has in its toolbox. So a good example is if sugar is addictive and it's a Schedule II drug, like an opioid, if sugar was an opioid, then the DEA would put out a list every year of how much sugar could be made and would run around and keep track of sugar dispensaries and so on and so forth. If the EPA controlled sugar, then sugar would be considered a pollutant, which, by the way, is very similar to the way the Maha moms think about sugar as a contaminant or a pollutant, an environmental hazard in the food environment. So it's not really that big of a stretch. And what would the DEA do? Well, the DEA would also control the production of sugar and look at outputs from the factories. But EPA would have civilian fines. They would take you to civilian court when you broke the law and would have fines for making too much sugar. The DEA would take you to criminal court and put you in jail for having too much sugar. Meanwhile, the Department of Agriculture views sugar as an important commodity, and we give you more money for making more sugar. And so what I found
also encouraging you to limit your intake.
Yes. Limit your
10%
intake
of calories, but we're going to pay people to manufacture it.
Or at least going to put a safety net under their production so that they don't necessarily lose money. And we're talking about, when we talk about sugar, we're talking about 3 companies that make all the sugar in the United States. We're talking about very large monopolies that are receiving what we would, on the left flank, consider corporate welfare. Through doing that. But the other thing that came through is as you look through the article and you see the various ways to treat it, like IRS would treat it as a tax issue and would have taxation on it. You see that all the things that have been put into the air quote scientific literature in terms of ways to manage America's problem with sugar are all these different methods. We have the taxation method. We don't have the criminal penalties yet. We have the control of how much sugar is labeled in products or outputs. And I just thought it was an interesting way to look at how our federal regulations box in our ways to manage
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah. It sounds like an RFK Jr. wet dream is what this sounds like. Because but really, this is an interesting intellectual exercise, it seems. But I've heard real proposals. So this is years ago now. She's not really a prominent figure anymore, but this woman named Mimi Roth is an anti-obesity crusader. And she was on John Stossel's show in 2010 or 11 or something. And she was talking about secondhand obesity. And she's trying to make the argument,
Okay.
you know where this is going, right? Obesity isn't just this individualized thing. Parents make their kids fat. Friends make other friends fat. And right. So it's sort of an EPA style
Well, it's
regulatory framework.
It's an epidemiological look, is that, birds of a feather flock together.
Right.
And certainly if you've been to the Golden Corral, there's observational data to suggest that there may be a truth there.
Yes, and maybe a cold, calculated, sort of creepy authoritarian way, certainly. But the fact that you're going to treat the relationship between a parent and a children, however disordered it may be, as an infectious disease chain, that's just creepy to me. Just to talk about,
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
So,
yeah. But I'm torn. My intellectual brain part says, God, that's an interesting way to think about things. My now we have to do something part says, well, probably there's no vaccine here that we're going to introduce. So maybe we have to look at some other
Well, I mean, you've got
transmission.
you've got the GLP-1s. So, I mean, maybe we're trying to solve a cultural problem, right? Like the way people think about food and how they use food. Like we have so much of it. It's not just about, oh, my stomach's empty. I need to make that feeling go away, right? We think about food in a wrong way. And I say this as someone who has struggled with weight for a long time. I totally get it. But you don't solve that problem downstream with, USDA quotas and DEA scheduling. It just, you know what I mean? It doesn't seem like that would become, that whole regulatory framework, that would become its own entity and it would defend its own interests, just like DEA does with opioids and these other things, right? That right? Regulatory capture, regulatory creep, whatever you want to call it.
No, I think you're right. I think that there's a value, again, there's an intellectual value in understanding that obesity has a cultural epidemiologic quality. In saying that when you sit down and when everybody in the house is eating improperly and therefore it has become obese, there's a lot of learned cultural habits in that. Mm-hmm. Okay, but you can't take it the next step and say, well, so now we're going to put them, in fat farm camp or re-education camp, or we're going to have to look for some pharmacological solution to that problem. We have to just say, gee, okay, we recognize it's cultural. Now, in the same way, while we're really off topic, but what the hell? I think this is also a good way to think about Secretary Kennedy. Secretary Kennedy was first and foremost an environmental lawyer. And his early successes in terms of the Hudson River and so on were all about environmental pollutants. And I think that that's the lens and the mindset that he looks at
everything.
Many things today. Certainly food, he looks at through that lens. That's why the idea that sugar is a contaminant, that EPA version of things, I think he would buy wholeheartedly into.
I think this illustrates sort of the folly in trying to regulate everyone's behavior in the way that, like as you point out, sugar is a nutrient. It's in everything. There's a little bit of it in everything, right? So that kind of highlights the absurdity here of how there's some problems you just can't solve with approaches like this. I think that's the biggest takeaway I get, and that's a perfectly valid critique against like the ultra processed meme, and you've written a lot about that too, where like you're trying to frame something that's just inherent to human existence, like eating, as something you get addicted to. It's like even if you're even if you're doing it correctly, you have to do it your entire life every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you cannot have Snickers use disorder the way you can with opioids.
Oh, I like that. Snickers use disorder.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Side. Okay.
I was reminded recently of your takedown of Andrew Kolodny at Brandeis, who wanted to redefine chronic opioid use under a doctor's supervision as a new kind of opioid use disorder. And I just thought, like, what? You know what I mean? Like, that's the sort of mania that I think we're getting at here when we're talking about these sort of approaches. We're like, we'll just define something that's normal as bad, and I'll have all the power to make you stop.
Yes. Well, is it sugar? I don't think the problem is is sugar. I think it's our relationship to it, and that gets to a variety of social, cultural, economic issues that are far harder to address than slapping a label on the package or declaring that tomatoes, the ketchup is a vegetable.
Yeah. I've had a recent about face on some things, and I think one of them is critiquing people for being really overweight. Like I think culturally that should be acceptable again. Like not that you go up to an overweight woman at a restaurant and start barking at her. No, but like as a culture, there are things that we condemn, like spousal abuse, right? Like it's just, and it should be. Don't get me wrong. Like it's okay if you go on TV and you go, "Don't beat up on your wife." Like it's just sort of ingrained in us that this is something we need to prevent and limit. And I think the same thing could happen with some of these health issues, right? You can recognize that there are behavioral changes that people need to make, and it's okay to shame bad behavior. That's a naughty word, I know. Maybe that makes your boomer skin crawl a little bit.
I'm getting a little nervous here. Because,
but I mean,
when I'm judgmental, I keep it to myself.
See, that's the problem.
Well, I freely admit to it. I think that part it's tough. I don't know. Have a good answer about that other than to say that when I'm judgmental, I try to the best of my ability to just sit there quietly and not say anything, because otherwise it's just not going to go well.
Yeah. There's culturally appropriate venues for it, or forums, if you will. Like, so if someone, when you were practicing, if someone came to you and you're like, look, your arteries are clogged, you need to stop eating this. Like, that would be appropriate because you're in a position of authority and respect and expertise. That's okay. And the same thing, when I was growing up, I was really fat as a kid, and my dad lost a bunch of weight, and he pulled me aside one day and he just said, look, you need to get this under control because you're going to die.
I'm going to disagree about the fact that it's about a position of authority, expertise. I think it has to do with having a relationship.
Yeah.
That relationship, that doctor-patient relationship, was born out of expertise and this and that. But unless you had that one-to-one ability to have a conversation with the patient, it could go equally as badly.
Mm-hmm.
That once the patient recognized that you were on their side and speaking on their behalf, much as your father would have done,
right?
Or I could do with selected patients.
Yeah.
That was the value as compared to, because I think that the governmental approach is much more along the lines of expertise and authority and legitimacy, and saying, this is your ideal weight, and go get there. And if you don't get there, then there'll be other consequences.
Yeah. Well, but maybe a couple of things. So like when I heard that from my dad, It didn't feel good. It felt, I was like, oh, that's embarrassing, right? Like you're
Right.
confronting a real problem I have.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's what that sort of relationship was for. And one other example, this was several years ago. My old doctor, I went in for my physical or whatever, and she's like, so listen, I'm going to put you on a statin if you don't get this in check. And she's like, you have to do this. Like you're in your 30s and I'm contemplating putting you on a cholesterol lowering drug. Do you understand that? You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
she was very, very diplomatic, but she effectively communicated the risk that I was facing, and it worked. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So that's all I'm talking about. We need to take those sorts of interactions and make them broadly more acceptable. Because, and here's the only final thing. Because we don't have those sorts of conversations anymore, we're in this world where we're like, maybe we should let the DEA schedule sugar. Like, you end up in crazy places when you don't do the hard work earlier on. You know what I'm saying?
It's the hard work of door-to-door retail sales. It doesn't scale. It's
Right.
not like there's an app that will do that. They'll try and tell you that there's an app that'll do that, but there isn't an app that does that. So it's very much one-on-one. I'll leave it at this. I had the same kind of conversation with my patients about smoking. Now, but I took my own approach. I just pointed out to them that if they continued smoking, it would be bad for them, but it would be good for me because my kids had to go to college, and they were going to be supporting that effort.
So genius. That's like reverse psychology, the ninja star, whatever. Like just
Well, that was just generally my approach. In fact, for a big donor, we could actually name them a graduation. I don't know if you've seen that commercial where they have the kids up there from the suntan parlor because they sold the naming rights for graduation. I'm good with that. I was
Yeah.
good with that as a physician.
I'd like to thank Biff for smoking 2 packs of Marlboros for
How's the
40
day?
years.
He covered all of the semester's tuition.
Really good stuff. Thank you for joining us as always, everybody. Once again, this really intriguing article is called What If Sugar Were Regulated Like Opioids or Air Pollution? It would work out great. It would work out great. Let's do it. I'm on board. Just kidding. Follow us on social media. It's at ACSH.org on X. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just look up the American Council on Science and Health. Our colleague Anna Delaski does all of our videos and infographics. Really helpful stuff. Entertaining, interesting, educational. It's all you want out of science media. Go follow us on all those platforms. Support our organization, by the way. If you love our work, if you benefit from it, go to our website, click the donate button, send us $5. It goes a long way. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.
Ciao.